Chapter 1, The Real S. Dot. Now, to keep it all the way 100, S. Dot was a street name I stole from my cousin in Chicago. S. Dot was a well-known trapper hustler in the city of Battle Creek, an anonymous businessman who was well known in the streets of the criminal underworld in Cereal City, USA between 2005 and 2012. To keep it all the way 100, S. Dot was a street name I stole from my cousin in Chicago. You see, it was the rap name he used to go by before he was picked up by the narcotics police. When Jay was picked up on that attempted murder warrant, I was sure that my drug trafficking days were long gone. I stayed clean for an entire year before jumping straight back in it. Prior to attaching the tag S. Dot to my street credibility, I started out pitching a couple bowls, better known as pounds, and almost lost my life. I was well known at the time to push major trees and decided to try my hand with the work and knew an alias was one thing I would definitely need. The real S. Dot was known for having that A1 fire work. Girl, white as a napkin, rocks like a dingy white t-shirt. A path that was so much different from how I had started out in the church. What was I doing? Simply trying to get paid. And what I didn't realize was that to the love of money, I had fallen and become enslaved. The game I was playing was no game at all, but literally a matter of life and death. A lifestyle that for so many has been the cause of them taking their final breaths. What would my time in the game bring? Obviously not death if I'm writing this, but would bring me to a place with not many options left. Follow the Exit Sign is a series of books from the life of B.D. Alexander and how many of his experiences can be help for so many. These books and resources are designed to make one aware of the rules and consequences of our actions that lead to either life or death. So, where did this life begin? December 19th, 1985, a child was born, a son was given to Byron Qualls and Elizabeth Tutta Alexander. Although it started out in what appeared to be a fairly happy home, in less than a year's time, everything would apparently go wrong. By July 14th of the following year, Byron Qualls, my father, also known as Ricky Rose, was taken from this earth. The court files read as follows. The People vs. Marlon Howland, defendant appeals as of rights from his conviction by jury of second-degree murder and possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony. He was sentenced to 60 to 90 years for the murder conviction to be served consecutive to the mandatory 2-year sentence on the felony firearm conviction. We affirm. The defendant's conviction stemmed from the shooting death of Byron Qualls, a reputed pimp and drug dealer who was shot in the chest and buttocks at close range with a shotgun. Qualls' body was found by highway workers in a ditch along Interstate 94 near the Michigan-Indiana border, covered by a sleeping bag and a piece of carpet. Although Qualls was known to wear a lot of jewelry, none was found on his body. The evidence adduced at trial of the defendant's guilt was overwhelming. Defendant's uncle testified at trial that defendant arrived in Chicago on July 17, 1986, driving Qualls' 1982 Cadillac automobile. Defendant told him that he had shot someone in Battle Creek. He described the wounds and how he put the victim in the trunk of the Cadillac wrapped in a carpet. According to the defendant, the victim was still alive when he was placed in the trunk. However, the victim's pounding and screaming from inside the trunk grew fainter as the defendant drove along I-94. Defendant admitted that he buried the victim's body in Indiana. The carpet and sleeping bag found covering the victim's body were identified as coming from the defendant's apartment. A number of shotgun pellets and a piece of gold ring chain were found embedded in the living room wall of the apartment. Blood stains were found on the living room paneling and on the wall near the stairway. Blood spots were also found in the trunk of the Cadillac. All identified blood matched the victim's blood type. O'Neal Miller, former friend of the defendant, and Allie Humphreys, former girlfriend of the defendant, also resided in the Battle Creek apartment where the shooting occurred. At trial, Miller testified that he arrived at the apartment sometime after 8 p.m. on July 15, 1986. At that time, he observed the defendant and another man in the apartment. The unidentified man who had been shot was mumbling and laying in a pool of blood. Defendant was apprehended in Chicago 2 months after the shooting. During his arrest, defendant threw away a black onyx ring, which was later identified as belonging to the victim. A shotgun, determined to be the murder weapon, was found in the defendant's possession. Qualls' Cadillac automobile was ultimately located on the west side of Chicago. At trial, the defendant took the stand in his own defense. During his testimony, defendant denied shooting Qualls and presented an alibi defense. In particular, the defendant stated that on the night of the killing, he was not in Battle Creek, but was en route to Chicago. According to the defendant, he could not have shot Qualls because at the time of the incident, he was a passenger in a brown Chevy Nova with his uncle and his girlfriend. Although defendant claimed to have forgotten the girlfriend's name, it is undisputed that Diane Combs was his uncle's girlfriend and that uncle and Miss Combs drove a gold Nova automobile. In addition to his own testimony, the defendant also presented the testimony of his girlfriend, Allie Humphreys, who stated that the defendant was not present in the apartment when she heard gunshots. Further, Ms. Humphreys testified that after the shots were heard, she observed O'Neal Miller with a gun in his hand. Prior to trial, the defendant filed with the court a notice of alibi which gave the prosecution notice of the defendant's intention to assert an alibi defense. The alibi notice listed as the names of witnesses known to the defendant to be called to establish such defense: Marvin Hallisey, 1424 South St. Louis, Chicago, Illinois, first floor apartment, and Diane Combs, 1424 South St. Louis, Chicago, Illinois, basement apartment. Further, the notice of alibi asserts the following as the defendant's whereabouts at the time of the shooting. The defendant claims he was between Kellogg Regional Airport, Battle Creek, Michigan, and 1424 South St. Louis, Chicago, Illinois, between 8:25 p.m. and 2 o'clock a.m. on the 15th and 16th days of July, 1986. Regardless of what the streets, police, or the court records had to say about my dad and his reputation, he was my pops, and when I lost him, like so many others, I lost a part of me. The piece I was missing would leave a dent in my future. We used to have money when my pops was alive. The day he was taken, that all more or less changed. He died behind the love of money because of a man who ultimately went to any means to get it. When homeboy took my dad's life, he himself was barely 21. When he wrote me that apology letter nearly 3 decades later, Marlon Howland expressed that because of his own actions, he had never met his only son. As a child, though, I could never understand, and with built-up anger, aggression, and resentment, I had always planned to kill that man. In a way, all my life, I thought things had to be made right. In the end, I recognized it as Satan on the hunt to ultimately destroy my life. Little did I know at the time that the death of my father would be on my heels following me through life. Death knocking at my door. Bang, bang, boom, boom, bang, boom. Her heart dropped with everything she was doing. My grandma Bertha, the birth mother of my mother, rushed from the front rooms and around through the kitchen to the back stairs where she expected to see her worst fear. Granny Bert was always fussing and cussing, despite her faith, to keep that doggone door shut, and she say her thought was I was going to be blood splattered all over the cement basement floor. That was exactly what was running through her mind, and though she did not find me dead at the bottom, it surely was not the end, but where the scares of death would begin. The thing is, she was constantly worried about me falling down those stairs in my walker, and if not dead, I would jeopardize my ability to possibly ever learn to walk. To her surprise, although he claimed to not be involved, my older brother's role in it all is still up for debate. And in the upcoming years, I too would come to question his hate. The second round of events went down not long after I finally turned 1 year old, when my brother Tyrone put me in my stroller at the top of the hill and launched me like a bowling ball down an open lane. Did I mention that the paved street he rolled me down teed at a busy road where cars and trucks were known to rip and run? It was clearly shown that my 11-year-old brother's actions were cold. Fortunately enough, I strolled and rolled, was stopped by the curb, and went airborne out in front of my granny's yard. Hitting the ground, barely a toddler, I rolled. I mean, me and bro went through it as kids. What to him was just harmless fun, like the time we nearly knocked my eye out of his socket. One of them times when I used to punch him in the back, kick him in the butt, or slap him in the back of the head and run. That time, I had actually gotten away, but as we learned just seconds ago, the basement steps were no place to play. Standing, chest pounding on the other side of the door, I held my brother at bay. Playing along, he rammed the door open in full attack. Bang! Smack dab, the doorknob blasted me in the face, almost knocking me off my rocker. The blow cut a gash across my right eyebrow that required stitches. How did I not fall back and down the basement steps at my grandma's that day? Only God knows. My mom always said to this day that she believed it was my dad stepping in and the angels keeping me in place. Those were my early years when I was being raised by my granny because my mother could barely stand to see my face. It was like this until I was 3, pushing 4 years old. At my granny's house, in my beginning stages, was when she and I must have developed our incredible bond. By then, it was close to 89, and my dad had been gone since 1986. Around that time and before was when a lot of people got caught up smoking crack while the upper echelon played with the sniff. I was only a baby back then, so never knew until way later in life the side of the line my mother had fallen on to be messing with the stuff as a way to block out her pain. She say I was my father's world, and to look at me reminded her too much of him. You see, when my pops got killed, my mom was really going through. And how to keep up with this lifestyle they had acquired, she really had no clue. I mean, my dad, Byron, better known in the streets as Ricky Rose, was a natural-born, Chicago-bred hustler in every sense of the word. He was known to make most of his money out in the streets pimping women from the curb. According to the court records, that was only a little of what he had done, but when it came to Mom keeping things afloat, every bridge was being burned. We lost the money, the cars, houses, and much of what they owned until she got her own place and eventually moved back in with my granny. We weren't alone because that was where my older sister and brother lived. Right around then is when we were first introduced to the Lord Jesus Christ. Before that happened, my mom tried to kick the habit a time or two on her own, but failed unsuccessful. Then it came to the point she went 3 weeks clean, only to relapse to the pipe, a battle of the mind that made her on that go-round consider taking her own life, contemplating what would be the most peaceful way to end her shattered existence. The plan was to take some sleeping pills or maybe slit her wrist, but my mother knew my older brother would be the one to find her and didn't want to put that pain on him. As she went through how her act could be pulled off, the Holy Spirit appeared to her in a dream. In the encounter, the Spirit of God spoke to my mother as clear as day. She described being in a pitch black room where the voice of God spoke to her, describing all the sins she had committed, speaking that God loved her and that she belonged to him, repeating the statement several times. In the dream, she envisioned a little white church with a steeple on top. My mother had no clue where the particular church building she had seen from her vision was located or if it even actually existed. The building was way up in the woods, way out past the east side of town, and it had to have been nothing but God who brought us there. Turns out it was where we would attend service the following Sunday afternoon. The little bitty white church wasn't exactly the kind of place you would expect to find an all-black congregation, especially in an area like that. From what I recall, it looked like one of those little African-American churches from the movies where the KKK would burn crosses on the front lawn. The building could hold maybe 50 people, and although it was way out in the sticks, it oddly enough had recently been founded by a family from the Orchard Park area just like us. The Bible-thumping, tongue-talking brotherhood would serve as the spiritual foundation that would be laid out for me. I owe so much of my spiritual teaching, preaching, and understanding to that which was established at Emmanuel Temple Church in those formative years of my life. Once my mom accepted Christ and received the Holy Spirit, we were off and running, serving God in any capacity she could. My mother joined the cleaning crew and just took over, so much so that she would eventually head the committee on into a bigger building out on Main Street with a much larger sanctuary, an overflow, 2 separate second floors, a kitchen, church store, and so much more. Soon enough, those who attended became like part of my family, and when my granny Bert joined after receiving God on a trip to Kansas, it made it all the better for me. That was when for us, things truly began to change, and I mean for the better. Once we started getting to know God and began to draw close to him, our life like overnight was turned right side up. One thing I discovered early was that God being with us wouldn't stop the enemy from coming in and trying to wreck shop. Although the devil was coming against us, it was no comparison to the power of God and his angels being there with us. I can't say if mom was immediately off the stuff or not, but it was like as soon as we got in church, the devil started trying to kill me even more. At the corner of Springview and Roosevelt, near the old Spring Lake Lanes Bowl, is where we would learn that the obstacles of death would create opportunities for my angels to step in and see me through. As it was told to me, Mama turned the corner between where the bowling alley was across from where Save-A-Lot and the credit union are now, knowing she shouldn't have had no child in the front seat of that dingy 79 Cutlass she drove at the time. I'm not sure if it was blown out then or not, but I remember riding in that joint a time or two with the whole back window busted out. My mom hit the corner where we were. I don't know if we had just gotten in and the door wasn't shut all the way, if I was playing with the door handle or not. What I do know though is that I obviously wasn't buckled in and wasn't in no car seat, because when she hit that left turn, I went right with it. While hitting the turn, the passenger door where I was seated swung wide open. Either I was on the door handle or grabbed it on the way out, but when the door opened, I went out with it. Imagine my little legs dangling out the door, going between 2 streets until she could pull over to the curb. Me hanging on that door like a little monkey at 3 or 4 years old. Now that wasn't nothing but God. As a kid, I used to always wonder why anytime Mom hit the brakes hard, she would always reach her arm out over my chest when I was in the car. Call it mother wit, but looking back now, I see why she was like that. Always there, from what I mostly remember as one of my biggest advocates, having my back in the midst of a lie until the truth came out. You would think I had gone through enough and I haven't even gotten to the icing on the cake. This time, though, it was on me. It was me and Big Bro on the way from getting haircuts from Nook. And this was like 1990 by then. Riding me on his bike downhill through the OP Orchard Park. This was before I was big enough to ride the handlebar successfully, and the only option was to try and balance me on the cross member of his bicycle. My little feet dangling was the only thing we could equate to what happened next. Going down the same hill my brother had used a year or two before to push me down. Maybe I got caught up in the exhilaration of the thrill of going down the hill, or maybe it was karma. What must have happened was exactly what I had been originally warned not to do before we took off. All right, before we take off, make sure you watch your feet, little boy. I ain't got time for no accidents, my brother rumbled, contemplating exactly how he was going to get us home on his 18-speed Huffy. That was a good question, because just seconds before rolling straight into our grandma's driveway, my knees were skin bloody and half his face ripped off. Compared to his pain, my little knees weren't that bad once we picked all the gravel out of them. We hit it with some Vaseline or Neosporin and a few bandages. Bruh, on the other hand, had to get plastic surgery.